It's time to present our solution to our prospects' problems. Now at this point, we've already established exactly what the real reason for doing business is. Not only the problem that they have, but also the real impact of not doing something about that problem, and establishing that that impact is sufficient to give them commitment to doing something about it. We've also established their budget, and I'm not just talking about the money that's going to be invested, but also the time and the resources, the intellectual capital, the human capital that needs to be invested in getting rid of this problem. We've understood their decision-making process, and we've aligned ourselves with that decision-making process. We know what the cast of characters is, who's involved in making this decision, and why the decision is made that way. So now when we come to present the solution to the problems, we have to be very careful that we still don't just show up and throw up and give them all of our features and benefits. You see, at this stage, it's very, very tempting to go into added value mode. And we have to be careful about that because, of course, value is in the eye of the beholder. It's only valuable if they see it as valuable. And remember, we've asked a lot of questions by now, so we understand what's going on in their world. So we know what is valuable to them, or we should do. So let's make sure we only present the stuff that is genuinely of value to them. Don't go into added value if added value just means throwing in the kitchen sink. Because if you put in additional features, additional benefits, additional bells and whistles that we haven't previously discussed and are not directly associated with the problems that you've already identified need to be solved, well, you are going to derail the sale because you're going to give them too many things to think about, and those things are not relevant to them. Now, that's not to say they won't become relevant at some later stage, but Sandler rule: sell today, educate tomorrow. This is about a long-term relationship. You're selling for the marriage, not for the wedding night. So you need to make sure that you are actually working towards just the problems that you've already discussed. Avoid the temptation to talk about loads of other things. Now let's assume that we actually get to the right outcome here, which is a yes. And really you should do, because if you've understood everything that we've talked about so far, then really a yes or a no are the only two valid responses to be having to this presentation, and ideally you should be on for a yes, because basically you've already established that the deal's there to be done. It's kind of yours to lose at this stage. But let's say you get to that yes. What does that look like? Do you run off skipping into the sunset with glee saying, "Fantastic, I've got one. I've got my sale"? No. Remember when we talked about having a system and staying just slightly less enthusiastic than your prospect or your new client at every stage during the process? Even now, even when they say yes, you just stay a little bit less enthusiastic than them so that you can deal with two things that can come back to haunt you if you don't deal with them at this point. Those two things are vendor vengeance and buyer's remorse. What do those two things look like? Vendor vengeance is this. This happens probably more often than we'd like to think whenever we have unseated an incumbent supplier. So if you have been quoting against somebody who is already in place as a provider of this solution and they haven't been doing a great job, or there's some other reason why they've lost the business to you, probably because you're a much better salesperson than they are. Maybe that's the reason. But they are not going to take this lying down. I have yet to ever unseat an incumbent supplier and receive a greetings card from them and a bunch of flowers saying, "Well done, didn't you do a great job of selling to that client of ours that you've just stolen from us?" That's not going to happen. No, what's going to happen is very simply this. They're going to go back to your new client and they're going to say, "Hey, what did we do wrong? We're really sorry to see you go. Can we reduce our prices? Remember all those times that we helped you out?" They're going to try and play on the heartstrings of the previous relationship that they've had. So what you need to do before you start taking the money to the bank is you need to talk your new client through that conversation, to coach them into understanding that that conversation is going to happen, and to say, well, how are you going to respond when they come along to you and they drop the prices? Make sure that you've had that conversation up front so that your client has already started to work through this in their own brain so they know how they're going to handle the conversation when it happens. The other thing you're going to avoid is buyer's remorse. Now, buyer's remorse is very simply this. It's waking up the next morning and thinking, I really wish I hadn't done that. Buyer's remorse is having a business partner or a life partner turn around to you and say, you've signed up to what? Why did you do that? And then them starting to regret it. So talk them through those conversations as well. Talk them through exactly what that looks like. Talk them through, the sorts of things that might sort of come back to haunt them at 3 o'clock in the morning where they suddenly regret the decision, which will typically result in some sort of an email into your inbox saying, can we just put this project on hold for a little while? Now, if that's ever happened to you, that's buyer's remorse, and that's the sort of thing you need to deal with before you ever leave the room. Make sure that you actually deal with that stuff with good questions and good conversations before you realize that you have actually closed the deal.